Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Walker Independence. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, we're immediately picking where the last episode left off. At first, I was like, oh, okay, because I knew Kate didn't find anything in Abby's room, but when the gun popped up, I was like, oh, I guess it is hers. But then she was like, oh, why does a dancer need a gun? And it's like, oh, you know, because she's like, oh, like you're pointing a gun at me. I thought you were the threat. It's like, well, why was that? It's like, well, the fact is the way you looked at Liam when his body was brought in, that was your husband. One, she's like, right. The fact is you're hiding who you really are means you most likely, a possibility is you could have killed him. But she's like, I love my husband. I wouldn't do it. So it's like, right. I know you didn't. So it's like we find out that I thought she was a journalist. It turns out she's not. In fact, she's a Pinkerton, which I had to look that up. I was like, what is that? So basically, it's a security guard slash like policing organization that was started by a dude named Alan Pinkerton. So I was like, oh, so she's basically a detective. I was like, that's interesting. I would have expected that. I was like, oh, that's really, really interesting. I don't know if that's just him changing stuff for the show that maybe most women weren't, but I think it also fits because, right, her in particular as a woman, like no one's going to think much of like you being an investigator. Like that also, because most people are going to underestimate a woman. Someone's like, oh my God, there you are being woke. And not even that conversation. It's the time frame. Like in a time like this, no one would suspect a woman of being like something like that, like a Pinkerton or like a detective. So she's investigating this whole situation. So she gets brought into the fold. I love that Hoyt's pissed because it's like, wait, did you really have to tell her about, is nothing sacred, Abby? Like, the fact that you had to tell her about the bank robbery and the kidnapping. But Kate's in this because she's like, right, she's here to help Abby, not this little misfit family, this crew that she's put together. So, but the whole taking down Tom thing is going to be a slow process. It can't all be at once. But some interesting developments happen because his aunt, Teresa, who's played by Valerie Cruz, I had to look it up just to make sure because I was like, looking at her, I was like, isn't that who I think it is? Yeah. So one of the things I best know her from is she played Mama Vera on the Charmed reboot on the CW. So there's like the CW connection in that regard. So she as in like the Charmed one's mom. All of their moms, in fact. Anyway, with the exception of Kayla. Either way. So she's in town, and she definitely seems like she's more in the know. So it's like, oh, this isn't just a Tom is wild, acting out, doing his own thing. It's like, no, this is an orchestrated thing. Now, whether the entire Davidson family's in on it, or whether just a few bad seeds mixed in, I mean, very reflective of Walker. Like, truth be told, the only really like bad seeds at the time were Gail and Dan. They were the only bad ones, but obviously that influence kind of affected Colton to some extent, but he was like the first one to really kind of be like a show like, right, not all the Davidsons are bad. Denise was kind of a bit of a mixed bag, and eventually Dan came around, but still, it is an interesting parallel there that it's like, right, here's, cause we find out apparently Tom was locked up in an asylum. Now, the fact is that Tom has a very complicated relationship with his father, makes me wonder, was there some correlation there? Because his aunt, she's like, I think of that boy, cause she's like, right, she references Achilles later on, we all have our heels. She's like, that boy is mine. Like, the fact is, my nephew, I treat him, he's more like the son I never had. So, I think that's fascinating. And like, obviously for Tom, he's like, he's quick to be like, yo, though that was years ago. That was way in the past, the whole him being in an asylum thing. But I'm curious, is it something he did and his father threw him to the wolves? Or is it just in general like, oh, you were just a disappointment, you did something and I came up with the punishment of sending you to this facility just kind of because you were an embarrassment to the Davidsons? Because that might be why Tom is so motivated to do what he's doing, because like I said, the conversation of his father's not that easy to impress or a hard man to please. So I feel like he probably is trying to work his way back into the Davidsons' good grace as a whole. Particularly, it's probably like his father's like the head of the entire family. So it's like, I mean, just like father figures, especially like, I mean, in a lot of cultures in general typically are. But I think in this particular case, his father's the real like head honcho of everything. So Tom's trying to not only get back into family's good graces, but his dad's. But by getting back in his dad's good graces, he's getting back into his family's good graces. So he's trying to get his seat back at the table. So I think that's why he's doing all of this. His aunt being like, right, I have an opportunity that can help us as a family as a whole, but also we could use this opportunity to put you in a position where your dad has no choice but to recognize you. So I feel like that could be the direction everything is kind of sort of heading in that mark. So Abby and Hoyt spent some time this episode, just like Callian and Lucia spent some time together. So obviously some interesting pairings, especially because they're kind of giving off like there might be some Hoyt and Abby stuff, because Hoyt's telling her to kind of like loosen up a little bit, you know. And he brings up a really interesting point that basically is like, right, when you do take down Tom and arrest him, you don't want to basically, like, because he'll win in the end if you've basically spent so much time getting revenge, you haven't really lived your life, that you've just kind of like hollowed yourself out in the process. If you do that, then he's won in the end, even if you take him down. Like, he's taken not only Liam from you, but he's taken like every other bit of you away. So kind of live your life, you know? And it's like, right, there's a little bit of like, yes, she could do with a little less rigidness. He could do with a little bit more rigidness because he's a little too laissez-faire about things. Yeah, you know? Kind of flying by the seat of his pants type of situation, and them kind of at the water together, and him like tying like the back of like her corset and stuff. He's like, yeah, we should bring Callie and Lucy in here. He's like, we could bring Kate too, but most likely the water would freeze over. He really does not gel well with Kate. But they ended up discovering some really, really interesting information because they went to go see the judge, the one who gave Tom like the position of becoming sheriff. It's like, how did he become sheriff overnight? It's like, yeah, Liam was missing, like, it wasn't even really known that he was missing. He just didn't show up for a couple days, and immediately Tom is able to just swoop in. And how did that happen? Because no one knew Liam was even missing or dead until like he had showed up. Well, talking to the judge, I love they had to put on that performance. Time and time again, Hoyt taking advantage of that criminal history of his. Is like, right, I caused a ruckus in town. I've done this. Apparently was trying to marry an animal at one point. I guess it's just like, he was like, yeah, I was so drunk I don't remember half that. But Abby was able to kind of sweeten the deal and kind of like get a lot of that, like the charges dropped. There was never anything that would have seen him jail time anyway. But they ended up finding out, like, oh, how he found out about Liam being missing is because, well, for one, he has ties to the Davidsons. They're a very, like, influential family. But it turns out Teresa visited him. And looking at the logbook, Teresa only came one time at all this year, and that was a week before Liam died. So she came and told him before. So they're like, oh yeah, Liam's missing. Man, I mean, that's some devious shit. They had this planned that far in advance. I mean, granted, you don't have technology that allows you to move around. Like, I mean, yes, vehicles aren't what they obviously are present day, so getting around isn't going to be the easiest thing. So you need to set that stuff in advance. But to know, like, right, they've been planning this for a while. But once again, the question is, why, like, was it just happenstance that they chose Liam? There has to be other extenuating circumstances. Was it just because they found out, like, oh, Liam was going to be sheriff of Independence? Or is it just something specifically tied to Liam's past that, you know, Abby's still in the dark about? Because they set that up and gave themselves the wiggle room that, like, hey, because Tom set that up in advance, the moment he didn't show up, it kind of fed into the story. Well, because it probably gave him the judge the week to be like, well, he's missing, so Tom is already put in, you know, in the application, so like, hey, he can become the sheriff now. So it all played into his hands. Back at Hagen's, Teresa's doing she's been for a while trying to get Hagen to sell, but he refuses to because it's like, right, they are grabbing up places in, once again, Tom was trying to get that store, was it last week's episode? And now, Teresa shows up because he was supposed to be getting Hagen's from the beginning. She was trying to get Hagen's, but he just wouldn't budge. So she's trying to force their hand. She was such a dick towards Kate. And she's like, oh yeah, like, I don't care. Cause he was like, yeah, she's got bigger brains and balls than both of us, you and me put together, Teresa. But she's like, yeah, I don't care. It's just like, cause she still looks down on, it's kind of, I guess she's like here to do what she needs to do, but she also makes it seem like I think on some level she thinks she's better than Kate. So either way, turns out Hagen got poisoned. It's like, cool. I think Kate figured it out on her own, but it definitely seems like Kai immediately figured out, like, he didn't have to sniff it, but he just saw the drink and knew what was what because he knows the type of guy, but he probably can't say it, like the guy who was selling the drinks and stuff. Because I was wondering, did he do that on, it's like, there's no way he did that on his own. Like, Teresa had to grease those palms. So it is interesting because while he's selling Hagen those drinks, here comes Teresa, but it could be like, well, the fact is, I know that Hagen's buying this whiskey. I overheard that, so I could take advantage of this. So that's probably how that whole thing went down. But that's probably why Kai didn't say anything. He probably knows who this guy is, what kind of shenanigans he pulls. So it's like, oh, I know this guy is bad news, but I can't tell anyone without exposing myself for my history, which we'll get to Kai's circumstances later. But going into the whole thing, it's like, right, Teresa basically like either hired someone or she did it herself to shred up their costumes, because making the show an impossibility to happen, makes it like, right, you could easily get put Hagen in a position where he has no choice but to fall in line, and plus also on top of being poisoned. So, but they put on a show regardless. Abby helps out Hoyt too, which I love. I'm not even gonna mince words. I love the fuckery. I love that they, Hoyt doing his gun tricks and then pointing it out there into the crowd to Tom and being like, bang, bang. And Tom being kind of irked by that. And I don't know if that's supposed to be like hey, like, remember you got shot, and because he got Kai to like patch that up. And, Augustus was like, why? I thought that was supposed to be a reminder of you to keep your eye on the ball. And he's like, I don't need a reminding anymore. So I don't know if he's going to take that as wait, is that Hoyt playing coy because he knows who tried to take a shot at me? Or is that him admitting he's the one that took a shot at me? Or I don't know. And then once again, say it again, the fuckery continued when Kate went out there putting on her number. I was like, yo! Oh, like, basically, who is Tom D? We can't really trust him. He'll poison your cider. I'm like, yo, the bars. And just like dancing around him and everything. And even Augustus been like, oh, it's a little fun. He's like, yeah, but an insult's an insult. Like, ooh, it cut Tom D. Because I think he is someone that's never been respected a lot of times. So I think it really... Because wasn't he actually a lawman back home? So I don't know whether that's something his family had to help him. Like I said, like, his family's so influential, so he's probably seen as the black sheep of the family, with the exception of his aunt. So we know how his father feels about him to some extent, but we don't know what about his mom. Maybe his mom's not in the picture anymore. Maybe she died or something. But the fact is, his aunt's kind of like his number one fan, and she's the one that kind of looks after him so wholeheartedly. It does make you feel like he probably isn't respected in the family. So this isn't like Kate saying all that irked his nerves, because it's like, okay, here's another person disrespecting me. All I've ever had to deal with is people looking down upon me and disrespecting me. So that performance really irked his nerves, and everyone else was kind of having fun with the fact of how bothered it made him. Sadly, Hagen was put in a position where he had no choice to sign, but I love that he was like, oh, like, have you heard of like Medea? Like, I'm guessing because also later on referencing Achilles. I don't think I've ever heard of Medea. Obviously, I know Medea just for like the Tyler Perry stuff, but I didn't think of the name as like it sounds like it was a Greek story, like a Greek tragedy of like, yeah, I wonder if she like, because that is interesting, because like, it's a Greek story about a woman who poisoned, and like, typically, serial killer women, it's like a statistic. I don't even know if it still holds up true, but statistically, like, that's the weapon when it comes to women murderers, is like poisoning is kind of like the go-to. So I don't know if that's supposed to be like some correlation to like that Greek tragedy in general, like that maybe that general like statistic kind of has like some general connection to, obviously I know the parallels that Hagen was trying to make in this case. It's like, oh yeah, and she was poisoning and did all that stuff too, and she died painfully and horribly and alone, and I hope you do the same thing. But then it's like, oh, and then once again, the whole Achilles thing. And it's like, yeah, the person that matters to you is Kate. I'd hate for something to happen to her. So Hagen signs over, and Kate calls him a coward because she's like, oh, you cared about yourself and the business. And he takes it on the chin, because I believe Hagen didn't want to tell her the truth, because if Kate found out that it's like, wait, you sold this place despite everything, because he was never going to buckle. But yeah, he might come off a little curmudgeonly and selfish, but it's because he cares about Kate. He does like her. And so he probably legitimately thought, like, if I tell her, she'll be riddled with guilt. She'll blame herself for things playing out like this. So he'd rather take it on the chin. And because she's like, oh, you're basically going to die alone on a feather bed. And he swallowed like that gut punch she hit him with, but like, I mean, metaphorically speaking. And I think he had to take it because he didn't want her to know. He did leave her the hat saying like, right, it does. He's like, I think it's a better fit for you. So she's going to be the one kind of filling the Hagen role. But even more so now, it's like, right, this solidified it even more, because that was what like solidified it for. It's like, she did all this because she wanted him not to win. It's like, I can't let this guy swooped in, kind of gotten everything he's want. Abby kind of really set him back last episode, but now it's like everything fell in line and he made sure to put her in her place. It's like, you will work this place for me. Because why? Because you have nowhere else to go. Because he doesn't know the truth about her, but it's also like if anything happens, he'll also probably take it out on the girls to some extent. So it's like, we can't let him have the run in the middle of this place. So I have no choice but to stick this out, working for him, you know? So, and he's like, once again, he wants to put on this like front, because it's also, it ties into the whole conversation he had with Augustus, that the person he's named after in, the Greek story, just, I think not even just Greek mythology, just Greek history. He's like named after Augustus. Maybe it was specifically Greek mythology. Maybe I don't know if I'm assuming it was like a real person in Greece at the time. But he talked about like, was it Pax Romana? I think it was like Romana. Basically, it means like Roman peace. And that's what he tries to do. He tries to keep the peace. And I guess in his own twisted way, Tom thinks he's doing the same thing. Or at least putting up the front that he's keeping peace. So this whole situation just solidified it even more for Kate. Like, no. We have to like make sure Tom goes down for all of this. So it's no longer just she's working. She's not just like working with them. It's like, no, we're in this together. So now there's 4 of them. Circling back to the Kai situation, him like, coming up with the new costumes, and she's like, well, Kate's like, I can't pay you. He's like, no, it's fine. It's like, he's like, he makes the excuse of like, yeah, I could use it for like publicity for like my, promotion for like my work. But he also says like, yeah, like running the restaurant and like washing the clothes and stuff. He's like, that's my job. Like designing stuff like this is his passion. And like the moment she kissed him on the cheek, he was almost like he was ready to like his heart was going to explode out of his chest. He was so happy because once again, like we know he has a thing. Like I think Kate's completely unaware that he has a massive crush on her, or maybe she is aware and she's just just kind of going the flow of it because she probably thinks like all it is a crush. But it's like no, it seems more like not even smitten. It seems like your boy Kai is just straight up in love. So I think that's cute. But the guy coming in who is selling drinks and stuff, he knows Kai. Apparently Kai got into some trouble back in San Francisco because there was a girl that was in a brothel and he tried to get her out of it and apparently left some bodies in his wake, and maybe at least 2. So it's like, cool, you don't want them to know what you're up to. You don't want anyone in this town to know what you're running from and laying low from. Give me all you got, and maybe I'll keep quiet. Then he comes back for more. That's the problem with someone blackmailing you. They will just keep coming back. It doesn't matter what Kai gives him now. He's always going to want more and more because he knows he can come to you. But then Tom stepped in and was like, yo, are you trying to blackmail him? Bam, get out. You ever come here again, I will kill you. Which is so interesting considering he worked with your aunt to make that happen. But I was like, wait, are you trying to get Kai on your side? But he specifically, when he leaves, he's like, Kai, remember what happened tonight. Because he was like, you made Kate that suit she put on a performance, right? Well, make more. So I don't know if he's going to lean into that and have like, well, probably just going to have Kai make more of his suits. Because at first I was like, was that just to get all the ladies at Hagen to wear them? But it's like, no, it's more so like, no, I want you to make me more suits so I don't have to keep wearing the same one over and over again. I want something sleek and a nice design like that. So... But it's almost like him being like, remember, like, next time you step out of the line, like, doing what you did for Kate, I'll let it slide this time. But no, like, I helped you, so I can be a great help, or I could be an issue. Plus, maybe also insinuating he heard some of that conversation, so he could always blackmail you with it. Maybe not. But Kai was like, because the moment Kai picked up because I was like, well, the easiest thing would be just to kill the guy and dispose of the body, but that drew too much attention. And when the time came, Kai was seconds away. I was like, he's not going to do it at the last second, is he? Because when I heard the bell ringing, I thought it was going to be Kate, but it ended up being Tom. So good thing it was Tom, and good thing anyone showed up in general, because Kai was seconds away from like, I don't know if it was just going to be like a clean slice to the throat or multiple stabbings, what it was going to be. Kai was about to murder that dude. You're kind of like, there's a part of me like, well, fuck around and find out, right? So we'll definitely have to wait and see where things kind of go on that front. But there's the whole situation with Lucia. Obviously, just everything with her family, but also everything between her and Hoyt. Because even Callian was like, right, I was hanging out with Lucia, but like we spent the entire time like talking about you too much. The fact of the matter is, like, whatever move you're going to make, you need to probably make some decisions now before she makes those decisions without you. Because she enjoys singing and stuff like that, but her family kind of reins her back in. It's like, no, like you could be in so much danger. Like just stay home. And, because it's like, right, you're kind of our princess and we want to protect you from the nasty world. I think her mom was even implying like she used to sing too, and she knows how rough and tumble those type of places can be. So Lucia's kind of having her wings clipped. And Callian's in this complicated space where, God, what was the wording he used? It was almost like he's having trouble with he was basically referencing his people are not too big fans of change, and then Lucia was like, with you or the town, and Callian doesn't say anything because he thought like, oh, he had lost his all he said was like, yeah, I lost the trust of my elders, and Lucia was like, me too. So it's like a common ground in that regard. But I think it is like after that conversation last episode where it's like, right, where are your priorities? If it's not for your people, then who? Like, and who? What? No one else's situation should ever come before your own people. So Callian's kind of being torn in that regard once again because it's like, right, the I kind of fell through with the whole like meeting with Francis last episode, but I was too busy helping out Hoyt and obviously mixed up with this whole like mainly it was Hoyt, but obviously that's still all tied together to the whole helping Abby circumstance as well. So well, I think we're going to be seeing that storyline kind of spread out more and more going forward about his allegiances and the cost that's what is going to cost him in the end. He is going to have to. He probably won't be able to balance both forever. Eventually, he's going to have to pick one over the other type of situation. I mean, maybe he can keep, but I just think it's going to become increasingly harder and harder because he's just going to be forced in situations to pick a side. Because they also had this interesting conversation too about like, right, it isn't just their cattle situation. There are other ranchers, and what pisses her off is like the Davidsons think they could come in, swoop in, and take whatever they want. Which Callian and his people know that all too well. People believe they're owed something or that something is theirs to kind of do whatever with, which she even apologized, being like, right, you would know even more so than I would because of just everything that's happened with you and your people. So some very, very interesting developments all around. I won't lie to you, I was almost hoping that soap she got from Abby, but that would have been too much of an issue. But but she was like, hey, that Abby girl, I think she'd be good for you. So I think we're definitely going to see Tom making more moves against Abby, and you're like, that's going to be so effed. I mean, he did invite her to dinner and stuff at his place, and but I'm also like, oh, that's good. She's going to have to play the role and lean into it just for the purpose of getting close to him, so it makes it easier to slide that knife into his back. But like I said, I was almost hoping just because of everything, I was like, please let that soap be poisoned or something. But it's like, no, because if it was, that drew too much attention back to Abby. So it's like, no. That was just her getting the soap like she said she was. Like, oh, I'll go to Austin and get the soap. And ultimately she did, just to kind of be like, hey, in good graces with the family. So it could definitely be, it's definitely going to be to their benefit having her kind of so close to Tom in particular. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.